Greetings. I am Dorothy Dowling, a principal at DEI Advisors. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to personal empowerment. I am really delighted to welcome Flo Lugli, president and founder of Navesink Advisor Group, to our show. Flo, it is such an honor to have you with us today.
Dorothy, it is always a pleasure to spend time with you. So thank you for having me.
Well, let's get to it. So, Flo, the one area that we really like to have every DEI advisor start their interview is telling us a little bit about their career journey. And you have had such an incredible journey on your various roles with HFS, and which became Wyndham, and all of the various acquisitions that Wyndham made, and where you became a CEO, the vice president of sales role that you had across all the shared services at HFS and Wyndham. And you've just been an amazing advisor and mentor to so many individuals in the industry through your board work and consulting practice. So I'm hoping you can share your development path and how this has made you into the very successful executive that you are today.
Sure. I consider myself very fortunate. I came upon the travel industry almost by accident. When I was a kid, we only ever took one vacation, and that was a weekend in Atlantic City, way before the casinos came to town. So we just didn't travel, and so my first job in travel was with People Express Airlines, and that was a small startup that came out of deregulation, and I had never even flown on an airplane before, and here I am now working for an airline. People Express had a unique culture. Every employee had multiple roles. Everyone got in-flight certified. You worked the ground ops, check-in, and everyone got to choose what we would call a line function. That was a corporate role, whether that was finance or marketing or whatever. And so, while I was going through the list, I'm saying, I don't really want to choose finance. I don't really want to do that. Travel agency marketing, I have no idea what that is, but that sounds kind of interesting. So that's what I chose. And then eventually, as the company grew, that expanded into servicing the corporate market. The early days of NBTA, you remember those initials?
I
And travel agency, marketing and so forth. And so eventually I also provided support for training for the frequent flyer program. And so all those experiences really led me to my first role in hospitality with Howard Johnson, who had just moved their headquarters from the Boston area down to New Jersey. And they were looking for someone to support the sales and marketing teams. Now, initially, the recruiter had contacted my supervisor at People Express, who happened to be a 727 pilot. And he's like, well, I fly planes, so I'm not interested in this. Why don't you talk to Flo? And fortunately, I got the role. But I do remember my first day in that role, and I walked into this office, and it was still under construction, and there were a bunch of boxes in the office. And my VP supervisor said, just go through the boxes and, familiarize yourself with everything there. And as I started to go through that, now, no computer or anything, these are literally boxes of papers and files. I thought to myself, I have made a terrible mistake. I'm never going to be able to learn all this. And I immediately called my husband and said, I think I made a mistake. I don't think I can do this job. And as your husband has, he's always been my biggest supporter. Calm me down, reinforce that I could do it, that I was highly capable, advised me to just, observe, ask questions, and so forth. And so that was sort of my first day in hospitality, when the career that almost wasn't, I guess. Now, as you know, that small hotel company eventually grew through acquisition to become not only the largest hotel company or the largest hotel franchisor in the world, but also the largest real estate company and the largest rental car company. And, at that same time, late 80s, 90s, the hotel distribution and tech landscape was changing rapidly. And so between the rapid growth of the company and the disruption within the tech industry, I was able to, quickly advance my career and sort of rotated through roles within sales and marketing and distribution technology. Ultimately, being in 1998, being named president of Wizcom, which was a hotel tech company that we acquired with the Avis acquisition. And there's an interesting story there too. As a highly acquisitive company, Ascendant relied on subject matter experts to help them with the due diligence on any acquisitions. And because of my Wizcom experience, I was called on to become the co-business lead for the due diligence on the acquisition of Gallileo in 2001. And upon the close of that acquisition, which was just 19 days after 9/11, I was named as EVP and was responsible for all of the supplier relationships. So, I had all the airlines, all the hotel companies, rental car companies, and other leisure providers as my customers. And after 9/11, obviously the industry was still recovering. OTAs were starting to gain traction. And once again, I sort of found myself in the middle of major industry disruption. Airlines were reserving their best fares for their own websites, as well as, OTAs really starting, as I said, to gain traction. And so over the next few years as a leadership team, we really had to manage through fundamental changes in the business economics and the growing technical capabilities of our supply and agency customers. And so what happened is that we had to significantly reduce our margins. We had to take some haircuts on what we were charging. And then, of course, there was the breakup of Ascendant into separate companies, and eventually the acquisition of that business unit by Blackstone. And so when I look at sort of my 8 years at Gallileo and Travelport, I was asked to play a number of different roles because of the disruption and the transformation that was happening. I almost became like a firefighter, like, oh, maybe we should put Flo on this and ask her, to check it out. I don't know. And I did it. Maybe, I was always willing to take on a new challenge. And really all that experience really sort of came full circle in 2009 when I came back to Wyndham, which of course was the successor to that little Howard Johnson company. And I was asked to help drive sort of their distribution and digital transformation because after the recession of 2007 and 2008, the OTAs were really getting even more of a stranglehold on the hotel industry. Most of the hotel websites were underperforming, no mobile sites to speak of, and so forth. And so, when I think back over those 20 odd years or so with one iteration or another of the company, I think what it really did was instilled in me that, change is simply just an integral part of the business. And you have to be comfortable with change and seek out the opportunities that come from it. But I think that's probably one of the most critical success factors for any executive is to embrace the change versus fight it.
Well, that is an amazing career story, Flo. And of course, I had a front row seat watching you at HFS and Ascendant, and you truly were this remarkable leader who brought so much value creation to all of us. So thank you for sharing your story. I'm wondering, as you went through that career journey and as you also navigate this stage of your career, if you have a personal mantra that has really helped shape that journey.
Yeah, as you know, we had several folks come through the senior ranks of Ascendant during those days, and some were fabulous, and some we learned not to emulate them, and some of the folks I'm thinking about. But when I think back on it, I love Maya Angelou, and one of my favorite quotes of hers is that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And I've tried to really emulate behaviors from colleagues and other executives that I admire. And for those that sort of are on the line, I try to remember not to exhibit that behavior. But I really just try to treat others with respect and care, and care about them more even beyond the work, but beyond the work environment, but into a personal in a personal way as well. And I think that's sort of how I approach life in general.
Well, I know I have shared with you, Flo, that I had the privilege of seeing when you went through the due diligence. Obviously, I was on one of the companies that was being acquired, and I saw the level of care that you gave to everybody through that process. But more importantly, what I saw was that all of the individuals that lost their opportunity with the company as a result of the acquisition, it was just the amazing investment that you made with so many in helping them find a new role in the industry. And I've never forgotten that, Flow, because I watched what a difference maker you were to so many in terms of making sure that they found a place for their future. So thank you for all that you've done for so many of us over time.
Well, you have to give in order to get. So
No question, but you live it, Flo. So it's always been something that I've truly appreciated about you. Um, I'd like to move on a little bit about mentors. I know you spoke that you were a keen observer of many executives in your various career opportunities, but I'm wondering if there's anyone individual or a few individuals that were important to you in terms of shaping your career beyond Robert, who I know has been an important champion for you.
sure. Well, I mean, several obviously have made an impact on me, including you, Dorothy. But I would say, starting from the beginning, that 727 pilot, Joe Lapinto, he mentored me and others at People Express, and uh, was one of the reasons I was able to get the Howard Johnson role. I think back that, probably one of my biggest breaks came when Scott Anderson, you might remember Scott,
I
he was
do.
the EVP of marketing at Sendint. And, Scott was this big vision guy. And I remember, sometimes sitting in a room when he's talking about what we should do, thinking, oh my God, that's so hard. But he asked me along to a meeting with Wizcom, who had just had a 34-hour outage, and their customers, as you can imagine, were irate. And we drove out to Long Island and met with the Wizcom team. And afterwards, he said, I want you to write a report. I want you to make some recommendations of what we should be doing with this company. Right? It just didn't fit into sort of the mold. So I wrote a report. I included names of people who I thought, would be great to run the company. Handed it in and didn't think twice about it. I went back to sort of my day job. And about a week later, Steve Holmes, who at that time was our CFO and is currently chairman of Wyndham, called me into his office. And of course, you're a nervous wreck. Here's, Steve Holmes. And he said he liked my report. He thought I had some great ideas, but that he wanted me to take on the role. And, the first thing was, oh my God, what did I say in that, that I now have to deliver on? So I was shocked, to say the least. But, he and Scott probably had more confidence in me than I had in myself to take on that role. And, from there, that enabled me then to take on sort of the due diligence lead with Gallileo, and just sort of go on from there. I think some others that were instrumental were, Bob Zapletal, who, we both thought a lot of. He was just really one of those that we definitely want to emulate, cared about his people. And then later on, Sam Katz and Ken Estero at Gallileo were big supporters as I took on the renegotiation of the United Airlines agreement. So this was a $700 million agreement that we needed to renegotiate. But more importantly, as the disruption was happening, we needed to protect about $100 million in margin. And if we didn't change the economics, we were going to lose that. And so was able to negotiate that pretty independently. And then that led me to taking on a new line of business and providing hosting platforms for low-cost carriers. So really, one thing sort of built upon the other. And then, of course, Eric Danziger at Wyndham was a big supporter of mine in helping me to really change the culture there while we were there. So I have to say those are probably there's probably tons of other people that I'm not mentioning, and so that's the difficult part when you talk about people who have been important in your life.
Well, I just think that thread of you speaking about how so many saw things in you that perhaps you didn't recognize in yourself at the time is an amazing story because you really did bring that amazing capacity to understand technology, distribution, marketing, and sales flow. You were a commercial leader before we used the word commercial leadership. So I'm sure that was the thread that they saw in you that you brought forward.
Sure.
Um, you have taken so many risks in your life. I mean, you are sort of a poster child in terms of walking through so many opportunities when they were or open doors that were opened, you walk through them. But I'm just wondering if there's any significant risks that you've taken in your career or your life that really were transformational in terms of your personal and professional growth.
I think really deciding 10 years ago to leave corporate life and strike out on my own, a little bit about what goes into that decision. And primarily because I was the breadwinner of the family. But I was looking for a more balanced lifestyle. I was tired of the office politics. And I knew that my success actually would be highly dependent upon the relationships and the network that I had built up over the years. And so it hadn't yet really been tested, because sometimes you're in a senior role in an organization. And so a lot of people come and talk to you because you're in that role. When you're no longer in the role, sometimes, they sort of forget about you. So I think that was probably the biggest risks that I took is striking out on my own.
Is there anything that you learned through that process, Flo? Because I know that when you shared with me that there was work that immediately came to you once you decided to go out and become an independent advisor. But I'm sure that it was a real testament to the investments that you had made in those relationships over the years.
Yeah, well, I'm here 10 years later, right? So that was something. I would say, I've had some amazing experiences. I've been able to better manage my personal time. I've been able to actually broaden the network even beyond what I thought around the world, in fact, and have met some remarkable people. But I've been able to really sort of narrow down what really excites me and what I like working on and what I don't like working on. And a lot of times when you're in a corporate environment, you just keep doing what has to be done. You don't get to really think about who you want to work with and what you want to do. And so that's something that's become much clearer. From a personal perspective, obviously I've been able to spend more times with friends and family and have taken some amazing personal travel experiences. I think it was a good decision at that particular time. And I have a lot of folks who are in similar positions who come to me and ask my advice. And so I say to them, first of all, you have to be committed. If you're going to go out on your own, you're going to go out on your own. If you really want another full-time job, then just be honest and say, I'm going to do project work until I find something else. So
Yeah, and that's
you
great
can't
advice.
you can't straddle, right? You can't straddle the fence.
No, you have to make that commitment.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, Flo, because you have been an amazing role model in the industry in terms of investing and really working on a very intentional plan to grow your networking. You were the president and CEO of Hedna many years ago. You're very active with HSMAI. You've always been a very engaged individual in terms of shaping the industry. So I'm wondering if there's any advice that you have to our audience in terms of how do you go about building those meaningful professional relationships?
You know, at heart, I kind of think of myself as an introvert. People may disagree, but I really, excuse me, I really have to challenge myself to get out there. Um, I believe that the network you build in your career can be the single biggest asset that you have. And it's not just for gaining opportunities, but it's having somebody to bounce ideas off of, to reinforce your thinking, and sometimes just to build you back up when you need it. People do business with those that they like and trust, and so I would say to folks, in their career, get to know your colleagues, ask about their family, show interest in their lives, build a relationship that goes beyond sort of the 9 to 5 world. Send them a note when you read something that you think might interest them. As I said before, you have to really give before you get. There are those people, we've come across them, and who, you only hear of when they need something, right? And, they lose a job, they need a contact, and so they reach out to you. And so the initial reaction, quite frankly, would be, I'm not going to respond to them. But I always do try to help, regardless of whether, I feel that they've been, a good person, if you will, because I'm hoping that they'll realize that it is a two-way street. And I just have to say that the biggest benefit of my career has been the friendships that I've built over the years. I wouldn't give any of those up for the world.
Well, I think that's great advice, Flo, and I would tell you you're highly respected and highly liked, and I think that has always been the way you have conducted yourself in terms of investing in others before you have expected anything in return. So, I think those are great life lessons for everyone. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about adversity because, overcoming adversity is something that we all need to navigate in our careers. So I'm just wondering if there's anything in your journey that was a learning opportunity for you in terms of dealing with adversity.
Well, where do you start? The one thing that most people don't talk about is we've all had adversity and disappointments. But, I think that if I think back to one situation that really sticks with me and that I know I learned a lot from, was really, a year or two after we acquired Gallileo, and I mentioned all the disruption going on. And so as a result, the company brought in someone to focus on the airline relationships. I had just spent 15 years on the hotel side. And so my position was leveled, or in other words, they just brought somebody in over me to report to the CEO. And my first reaction is, oh my God, how can they do this to me? I work so hard. I spent so much time here. I put my heart and soul into this company, and they don't appreciate me. And I have to say, it really shook my confidence up. And because up until that time, I had been on this upward trajectory. I'm really embarrassed to say that, I did not handle it well. And it took quite a while for me to get over it. And I remember the person that, I was reporting to in the next performance review, his comment was, so how do you think the last year went? And I looked at him and I said, well, I've been a real asshole. And I apologize for that, but I'm ready to get on with it now. And I was fortunate in that he was very supportive and understanding, and we were able to build upon that. And it has stuck with me that, your attitude really is everything. So yeah, that was probably the thing that sticks in my mind the most, is the first time. It's like getting that first B if you're a straight A student, right? You feel like you failed. So
Yeah. Well, thank you for being so honest about that challenge in your life, Flo. I know many of us have had similar circumstances where things didn't go in the way that we would have liked, and it did impact our confidence. But I do think that honesty and that learning that you were able to take from that experience and then build something really positive from it is an incredible story. So thank you for sharing that.
yeah, I mean, and in fact, the person that they brought in actually wound up being a terrific mentor to me. I learned so much from him, and it opened up many other opportunities that ultimately led me back to Wyndham. And so you kind of have to think things work out for the best. And so I'd say, the biggest lesson I learned was that, what we do is not who we are. And that a job or a company or a boss or whatever can take things away from you, but you are the one that's actually in control of your name and your attitude and your reputation.
Yeah. Well, that is very, very good wisdom for us all to listen and learn from. So thank you. I know earlier you spoke about change and that is just a part of our life and that we have to embrace it and continue on that journey. I'm just wondering if there's any strategies that you have that, because you have lived a life of change, that you could share with our audience.
Yeah. In nature, they say you either adapt or die, right? But, in your career or life, you either adapt or you move on. So, as humans, we're programmed to resist change. It triggers like this fear or flight or fight response. And, it could be something as simple as a new software program or business process, or, more concerning, like, oh, we have a new boss coming in and what changes is he or she going to do? I do find, much like I just mentioned, that focusing on my attitude towards change helps. Another Maya Angelou, if you don't like something, change it. And if you can't change it, change your attitude. And so I really try to look for what can I gain from the change? What can I learn? What new opportunities might be uncovered? Most people look at what they give up versus what they can gain from change. And, it's not easy, but, I've been fortunate in that, my whole career, for the most part, I've worked in an organization where change was a common theme. And so you had to adapt or you had to move on.
Well, I do think when we think about the hotel industry in particular, that given that we're dealing with perishable inventory, that intensity of how the business moves and that approach to constantly looking for ways to solve those commercial values is something that forces us all to hopefully be open to thinking about change in a very positive way.
Yeah.
I wonder if we can talk a little bit about work-life balance. It's a question we ask all of our advisors, Flo. You had a career that was extraordinarily intense in terms of travel and evening and weekend demands. I'm just wondering if there's any thought leadership that you can offer to our audience about how you thought about balancing your life.
You and I have had many discussions on this, and, I think it's one of the things that I struggle with the most. I mean, you talk about weekends. I remember being on a call with a bunch of lawyers during the Gallileo contract negotiations at 3 a.m. and making my husband sit there to make sure that I didn't fall asleep. So, having my own business now has really freed me up to do the things that I enjoy and work with the people that I like. I think it's important to have a clear view of what you like, what's important to you, what do you want to achieve career-wise, and then understanding what it takes to get there. I also think as you get older, you realize what's really important, and you're better able to prioritize your time. But if I'm not cognizant of it, it's very easy to fall back into the old habits of work, work, work. I happen to have a partner who constantly reminds me that I'm working too hard. I think it's important to understand that the world isn't going to end if you don't do things yourself, if you delegate or you ask for help. And like you, Dorothy, being the primary breadwinner in the family, it's important to have that person at home who's going to take care of that home front, do all the things that need to be done there. Because quite frankly, the biggest fallacy of all is this whole sort of super person, superwoman mindset that we talked a lot about when we were younger, because we thought we could have it all, we could do it all, but I don't think that you can. And so it's just something you have to be aware of.
Yeah. Well, I think you said some very important things there, Flo. One is sort of that awareness and intentionality of choosing how you spend your time. But I think that other element of, really growing and learning where you get the most reward personally, professionally from how you spend that time. It's part of that learning journey that we all are on.
Mhm.
So thank you for your honesty there. The other part that I think is really important that I know that people early in their career is that if you aspire to some of those very senior roles, there is a very high expectation in terms of the time commitment that's associated with that. And
Yeah.
I don't,
It's not
yeah,
an easy way to get there. There's no easy way
yeah.
to get to the top. Yeah.
And you have to deliver. Otherwise, there is someone else that can do the job better. So it is just understanding that. Um, I'd like to talk a little bit, Flo, because I know we spoke about all of the commitments and investments that you've made with a number of industry associations where we have had the opportunity to work together. But most recently, just a few weeks ago, you were recognized by Focusrite. You were brought into their Hall of Fame. I wished I could have been in the audience to celebrate that achievement because it is quite an incredible one. But, I know when I watched it on video, they talked about the profound impact that you have had on the industry. So, I don't know if there's any comments that you would like. It is an incredible achievement, so congratulations, Flo.
Well, thank you, Dorothy. I have to say the recognition was especially meaningful, given, that Philip Wolf, who is the founder of Focusrite, was actually a friend and a mentor to me for many years. He sat on my Wizcom advisory board as an example, and was one of the ones who I learned that, whenever I needed him to talk to a startup, he got on the phone with them and he gave. And so, as you know, we lost him just a few years ago. So it was especially meaningful for me because it was his organization that recognized me.
Well, there are very few women in the technology space, and, I think many of us took pride in that recognition for you to be on stage and to be honored in that way. So congratulations again, Flo.
Thank you.
So we're moving to the end of our interview, Flo, and the question that we ask every one of our advisors is really to reflect if they were to go back earlier in their career and be that advisor to their younger self, if there's any advice that you would offer to the young Flo Lugli, perhaps at People Express or Howard Johnson's or earlier in your career.
Even earlier than that. I would say uh, be more confident, have more confidence in yourself. I think, especially, I don't know whether it was the generation when we were raised or whatever, but don't doubt yourself. Don't sweat the small stuff, because you really need to focus on the things that are important. And it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to tell people you don't understand something or to ask clarifying questions. And you know, emulate those that you admire. It's really important, and many of those folks could become your mentors as well. So don't be afraid to ask them.
Well, I think that is all extraordinary advice, Flo. And if I may, the one thing that I always think about you as we talk about leadership today, it's the human skills that are definitely sought out in great leaders, and you have always lived that in terms of the way you brought your humanity forward. So I do think that you are a great role model for us all to continue to learn from.
Well, thank you, Dorothy, and of course, I feel the same about you. So
Well, thank you.
thank
So,
you.
it has been an honor and privilege to talk with you, Flo, and I do hope that our listeners and viewers have enjoyed this interview today. And for those of you that are watching today, I hope that you have found this empowering. And if there is other opportunities, I hope you'll join us on DEIadvisors.org and view other great DEI advisors like Flo Lugli. So, Flo, thank you for taking the time to share your story with the audience. Thank you, audience, for allowing us to share Flo's story with you. And I hope to see you on DEIadvisors.org, where you will see other great leaders like Flo. So thank you.
Thank you.